So is this the future of Bionicle or, construction style figures? Have these Marvel figures been well made? Can we maybe make it a little bit better? Let's discuss. So we started off with the Iron Man figure, we got the Groot figure, and now we have a small range of these Spider-Man characters. There certainly seems to be a bit of a trend going on, and I guess this is the future of construction figures. Sure, these figures don't have any Bionicle or construction style pieces in them per se, so I guess you could say it's not technically construction bin, but they are technically still constructible action figures. So, we can use them in conjunction with our Bionicle, Hero Factory, or CCBS style pieces. But let's talk about the sets. So let's start off with Peter Parker Spider-Man. I actually really like this figure. The bright, bold colors are, of course, pretty standard to Spider-Man, but I think it's also really refreshing. With the previous construction figures, the Star Wars Ultra Build figures, that is, they were various shades of grey, black or white, with a few outliers, but they were all pretty dull color-wise. So it's really nice to have some big, bright, bold colors like this in a construction figure. I don't know, it's just lovely to see, and it brings a smile to my face. Speaking of faces, the face piece on Spider-Man, I think it actually works kind of nicely. On the previous Iron Man figure, a lot of people were saying they felt it was a little bit too off. It just didn't work for them. And I think it works much better on a character like Spider-Man here. Maybe you still don't like it, but I think it's pretty cool. Additionally, the printing on the kind of like lines and the spider logo on these pieces here is pretty decent. I was kind of worried these wouldn't really line up. There might be like a little misaligned just with some slight printing errors or something like that. But they blend together almost flawlessly. I was kind of surprised by this, and it's really great to see, I think. I also kind of think these Spider-Man like logo and, line pieces and stuff like that, I think they're surprisingly decent pieces, or at least sort of decent prints in that sense. I was kind of feeling like, I don't know, these are going to be too specific to Spider-Man. If you wanted to use them in other stuff, it might be too obviously Spider-Man. But I don't know, looking at it, and especially since some of them sort of split in half like that, I feel like you might be able to get more uses out of this that aren't directly related to a Spider-Man, suit or character in that sense. So maybe these printed pieces have a bit of a wider range of uses. I guess it depends how you want to use it, of course. The posability on this figure is pretty decent. He suffers from the same kind of shoulder issue that Iron Man did. These shoulder pads kind of get in the way of the movement and sometimes just look, they look a bit odd. Especially here when you have a bit more of a sort of outstretched arm, there's a bit of an unsightly gap there, which doesn't look too good. But, I understand that, that's how posability works sometimes. But, anyway, the rest of the movement is still pretty decent and I think works well. The feet can bend in some crazy weird directions, and maybe this can kind of help with different crazy Spider-Man poses. But that being said, sometimes the legs do feel a little bit stiff and don't quite go the directions you want them to. I'm being a little nitpicky when I say that. There's still a pretty decent range of posability with this, but it's not necessarily to the same level as a typical action figure might have. And normally I wouldn't make that comparison because Lego is a bit different, but I feel like with stuff like the Black Panther bust that's recently come out, which is sort of seeming to lead towards more of a market for kind of life-size statues and things, which a sort of different range of collectors might collect. I feel like it's fair to make the kind of comparison to action figures because that is a part of the market that I think Lego is trying to step into. Maybe I'm just making an assumption there, I don't know, but it seems like they want to sort of slowly edge into that range there. Who knows? The shoulder pads do look really nice, though, if you put Spider-Man in a more sort of static position. So if that's what you're displaying him in, there's really no issue with them. In general, I think the Peter Parker Spider-Man looks pretty good. And I think so does the Miles Morales Spider-Man as well. He has a pretty similar design to Peter Parker, so pretty much everything I said before also applies here with Miles Morales. But one fun thing is there are a few different pieces being used on some of the different body parts. And I do like those sort of subtle differences. This is a pretty fairly similar design with how Lego has built it. So I think these little subtle changes are a pretty welcome addition because they could have just gone early Bionicle and just recolored the set and it probably still would have worked. But I like that they tossed it up a little bit. So yeah, most of what works on Spidey works well on this Spidey. What works on Peter works on Miles. And he's also pretty decently comic accurate. Both of these are. It's very nice to see. And also Miles Morales has some pretty snazzy looking shoes. Both him and Peter make quite a nice pair. They look nice next to each other. Both of them also come with this sort of newer version of this shoulder piece. Now this is actually different from the previous shoulder pads we've seen on Star Wars Ultra Build sets, like this one, and it's different from the faceplate piece that we saw on the Iron Man figure and of course the faces on these figures as well. This one has these sort of bar connections at the top here. It's cool. I don't know, it's kind of just a different way of doing things, and I think it would fit well with the kind of other catalogue of Bionicle Hero Factory CCBS style pieces, so it works well. But what doesn't work well is when you take the shoulder pads and the face off to take this picture, and oh god, it's terrifying. With both Miles and Peter, I feel like their hands are a little short though, or at least the whole arm in general. I feel like they could maybe benefit from it being a little bit lower down, but it's not too bad. I think these figures are nothing necessarily to write home about. It's not the greatest thing in the world. But for what they are, they work well. And I like the way that LEGO is slowly expanding these construction superhero figures. I think it'd be cool if they expanded the frame even more. The current frame that Miles and Peter use here, they're very similar to the Iron Man frame. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like that that's sort of the default and they're kind of building off of that. But I'd love to see them try like a bigger physique for something like Thanos, or a character that has some sort of additional appendage or thing, kind of like the wings on a Sam Wilson Captain America. I think those could translate really well, and I'd love to see how LEGO would try something similar to that, and how they'd expand the frame even further by playing with different body shapes and different things like that. So they kind of did that with the Venom figure. Kinda. He does have a slightly bulky, stockier build to him, so that's nice to see. But, look, I'm going to be honest. I like to keep things really positive on this channel, and I like to treat things with the respect that they deserve. But in all honesty, I do not like this set. The neck on Venom sits at a really weird low angle, and it makes him look kind of derpy. It also doesn't really have a huge range of posability to it, which is a bit of a shame. The face design also looks kind of okay from some angles. I'll give him that. It looks okay from some, but from others, it just doesn't work in my opinion. I personally really liked the head design on one of the older Venom mechs from a set that came out a few years ago. I think that looked great. I also think the thigh gap on Venom is a little bit off. It just is a little bit too big. I don't know. I'm sorry, Venom. I don't mean to be rude to you, but this is just my honest opinion. The other two figures rocked. This one, not so much. That being said, let's all go around the circle and say something nice about Venom. Just because he has bad qualities doesn't mean he's a bad guy. Other than the fact that he's sometimes a bad guy, kind of an anti-hero, but you know what I mean. So some stuff I do like. I do like the torso and the back. There's some lovely printing on that. And I think if you were to build your own version of Venom, having these printed pieces would be a massive help and a lovely addition to whatever mock you might be making. I also think the longer claws totally remove the issue I had with Spider-Man before, saying that the arms and hands felt a little bit too short. This kind of perfectly complements that and fits it nicely with the rest of the proportions, in my opinion. I also think the teeth being printed on the side of this piece here, I think that's just kind of unique. It's weird to see printing on the side like that, especially such a sort of small amount of printing on a smaller piece. So I do like that. I don't really know how you'd use that piece, but it's still cool and a little bit more unique for sure. And once again, when you remove the face, it's equally terrifying. Otherwise, the posability of Venom is pretty decent. The shoulders sadly do get in the way of the arms though, and they kind of pop off if you lift the arm a little bit too high. This is kind of the best he can do if you want to lift his arms high. So a bit of a shame, but still, the rest is good. So I may not be a big fan of the Venom figure, but I do like the Spider-Man figures. But can these figures be improved in any way? Well, let's take a look at a couple different mocks from a few different builders and see some ways that they've maybe revamped the character or revamped the set in some way. The first mock we're going to be taking a look at today is by Nobu Terry, and he has taken Miles Morales and made him a lot more accurate to how he looks in the Spider-Verse movie. And I love that, seeing this sort of pop of teal as well as the sort of pop of dark blue on the shorts there as well, looks beautiful. I mentioned before in the video how I didn't mind that both Miles and Peter had the same rough kind of frame and build with little subtle highlights. But it's nice to see Miles very drastically different with, sort of brick-built kind of cloth elements, or kind of clothing, I guess is maybe the more appropriate term, for his hoodie and his shorts and stuff like that. Really nice to see, and great to see actual sort of like, clothing replicated in brick-built form there. Really makes Miles pop so much more and just looks so cool. Another mock by Nobu Terry revamps the Peter Parker Spider-Man now, and I think what's good about this is how much it kind of fills in some of those articulation points. It kind of just like covers up some of those gaps and just makes him look a little bit more sort of like holistic and kind of accurate to the source material. And that may have sacrificed some posability, not too sure, but it certainly makes this figure display much more nicely and just makes it look a lot more accurate to the source material, I guess you could say. So really, really like what he's done here. Let's move over to the final mock that we'll talk about here. This is a revamp of Venom, not specifically the toy, but just building Venom. What I like about the proportions on this one here is it seems a lot more accurate to the comics. He is a little bit sort of broader chested and a little bit sort of more buff in that sense, but that is sometimes how he's depicted in the comics, so it seems very fitting. The face design is very, very nice. Using those gears as sort of the teeth there for Venom looks perfect. And in general, this sort of spider logo on his chest here is magnificent. It's lovely to see it combined with that very large torso piece that comes on like Onward G2 and a couple other different sets in different colors and things like that. It's a bit more of a difficult piece to use, but it's been blended beautifully with the rest of this mock and specifically with that spider logo there. So nice to see a bit more sort of integration with system and other CCBS pieces here to really effectively make some beautiful, smooth, organic shaping and really represent Venom very, very nicely. So that's some different ways that you could maybe reimagine these sets here, and that's some of my thoughts on these Marvel Buildable Figures. I'm certainly excited to see where LEGO takes it next. Who knows what they might do, and who knows what characters they might do next. Do you have any ideas about what they might do? You could leave it in the comments below. It'd be a fun thing to discuss. And let me know if you pick up these sets as well and what your thoughts are on them as well. Thanks for listening. Happy building, and bye for now.